Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to be learning about Spring Data JPA. You know that when it comes to Spring Boot does a lot of magic for us. And today we're going to be learning those magic tricks. How basically Spring Boot does a lot of auto configuration when it comes to the data JPA. This video is the introduction to Spring Data JPA, where we're going to be diving in and we're going to be exploring the Spring Data JPA as a framework, and we'll be understanding that how different things are going on in this particular module. So let's welcome our hero of the movie today, which is Spring Data JPA. Let's dive in. Okay. Record to the cloud.
Recording in progress.
So what should I do? Okay, so I have a lot of things in my mind because I wanted to show you a lot of different things today. Okay, because you might hear that question from Refti. Refti just asked, right, Avlas, transaction management, how it is working in Spring Boot? We are not enabling it, right? So the developers, like if you have been working in industry for a few years, you're going to be having a lot of doubts because Spring Boot, is going to minimize a lot of different things. That is why I have forced you guys to watch some of the lessons on Hibernate, right? But if you have not watched also, that's fine. I am assuming that everybody at least have a little bit of idea about Hibernate. If not, you have a long weekend, go and learn a little bit, right? Because Spring Boot will feel like a magic. But we have to understand, it's not like we're just watching the magic. We have to feel like, okay, how that magic is happening, right? If you know that, then you can actually utilize Spring Boot for the maximum. Okay, so today, what we're going to be doing? We're going to be doing a very simple thing. It's like setting off everything by ourselves and then converting the Spring project to a Spring Boot project. What I mean by that? Basically, we'll create a Spring project, okay? Complete Spring project. We'll feel like Spring Boot is not there. And we'll try to understand what this Spring Data JPA means and what it is doing, okay? And once we configure everything normally, then we're gonna be jumping to Spring Boot and gonna be like, making it automatic, okay? So that we don't have to do a lot of different things. So what I want you guys to do, I'm sure that a lot of people are here. Maybe I know a lot of you having 5+, 6+, 10+ years of experience. So for you guys, it'll be like, okay, I understand what this guy is doing. Yeah, if you are somebody is having less than 2 or less than 1 years of experience, okay, or I feel like, if there is somebody who have taken this course also watching this recording, what I want you to do, just see what I am doing. You don't have to do all these things, and let me make you really give you an assurance that you don't have to do all this stuff by yourself whenever you are building a project. But as a dev, I know you guys have joined here because your first question to me is like, Abhilash, I want to learn things in depth, right? I don't know what you mean by depth, and I'm really scared when you say me that, Abhilash, I want to learn things in depth. I feel like, okay, what depth I can teach you? But today we're going to be learning something in depth a little bit. It's not depth, it's like the basics. It's like the understanding that the developers need to have, okay? So no pressure on you guys. Just hear it, answer me the questions. There will be some new classes, new interfaces name you'll be seeing. No worries, those are the class name. Just see it and ignore them. It's not like, okay, I have to understand all these classes. I have to understand all these interfaces. I have to understand all the methods which is present. No, you don't have to do that. In your project, what you basically do. You basically call the save method, you'll basically call the update method, you'll basically call the delete method, and the data will be deleted. You call save, the data will be saved. Nothing more than this you will be doing. You know that most of the time, right? So nothing to worry, just watch and understand, okay, this is what happening behind the scene. All right, so let's start. So the goal for the day, okay, what it is, very simple. We'll be creating an application. That application will be saving some data to a table. Okay, what is that table? Same table. I have the test01 database. Okay, Inside this, I have a student table. I have some columns, student ID, student mobile, student address, and student name. We have to save the data here. That's it. That's the simple requirement. But why I'm saying, like, we're going to be doing a little bit of internal stuff today, because I'm not going to use Spring Boot. We're going to be using normal Spring. We're going to be using Spring. We're going to be using JPA. We're going to be using Spring Data JPA, and we'll be seeing, like, how it is beneficial. Okay, by doing everything, by setting it off everything by ourselves. Okay, so let's just start a Maven project. So create a Maven project, and let's do a next. I will choose this as internal. Okay, Maven archetype quick start. Let me just click next. Group ID com.selenium express dot data JPA demo. Okay, artifact ID is like let's say data JPA intro. Okay, let's do a finish. It is building my project. Just trying to create my Maven project. It's downloading a lot of different things, generating the project, Y to confirm, Y, and it's going to generate a project for me. Okay, there you go, data JPA intro. Okay, now the first thing, what I'm going to do over here, I will be creating an application which will save a student object to my student table. That's it. Simple thing. I am going to create an entity here called student, and that entity I'll be saving in my student table here. Okay, simple. I need to fill the data inside this table. That's it, right? So in JPA, you know what we basically do. We are creating some Java application. We'll be creating some Java object, and we'll be storing that Java object to the table. That's it. Simple, right? So first we'll be creating an entity. So I'll just go ahead and click on new. I will click on a new package, and I'll create a package called com.selenium express data JPA demo dot intro. Okay, I will just say dot entity. Okay, and here I'll create my student entity, right? So I'll just create a simple class, and this is going to be a student class. All right, and that's it. So I will not be typing the entity and all the annotation. You know how to do it. So what I will be doing, I have already copied your code. Control A, Control C. Let's go back to here, from here, and I'm pasting it. Okay, that's it. So I've copied the student class. You can see the table name is students here, because in the database you have the table. Where is the database? Right here. Can I move it to, okay, it is here. Okay. All right. So you can see the table name is students. So here in my entities, the table name is students. I have a at entity annotation. That means this is the Java class, which is the representation of this table. I'll be creating the object of the student. We'll be storing it over there in that table. So I have this ID as the primary key. I have the column associated. You can see I have the student name column. I have the mobile column associated with the student mobile in the database, and I have all this, at column annotations. I have the getter and setters for the same, and the toString method. Simple. Now the thing is, I have written all these things, but I am getting this problem, right? I cannot import it. Control space. I'm not getting any suggestion. So what dependency I have to add? I want to hear it from you. At entity, at table, at ID, at column, at generated value.
Hibernate.
Hibernate core. Okay, Hibernate core we can add. Hibernate core also have this entity, because Hibernate is the implementation of JPA. So whenever you are creating any application, is it good to use JPA or it is good to use Hibernate?
JPA.
Why JPA? Why not Hibernate?
Because Hibernate is the what is it?
Yep.
It's used JPA.
It's used JPA, right? So JPA is the standard. Tomorrow, what about if I don't want to use Hibernate, right? I want to use Eclipse Link. I want to use MyBetis. Then it's better to code it with JPA and provide Hibernate as a implementation or as a vendor. Think like JPA is the set of interface and Hibernate is the implementation to those interface. Hibernate has the logic. JPA has just the method. Okay. So let's just add the JPA dependency to our pom.xml. Okay. So JPA dependency in the sense what I have to add. Anyone? So I have, for now I have only the JUnit dependency here. Let it be here. So JPA means what dependency I have to search? Anyone?
Starter data JPA.
Data JPA. The starter data JPA is a Spring dependency,
Yeah.
right? But yeah,
Okay.
so JPA comes from the Java. JPA basically came from the Java team. So what is the dependency name? Anyone?
Java X,
Yes,
Jakarta.
yes, Jakarta persistence API, right? So previously we used to use the Java X.persistence, and right now it is Jakarta persistence. So the name has been changed, right? So I'll say Jakarta, and I will just say persistence API. Jakarta persistence API. Let's search for this Jakarta persistence API. You can see the release came in 2022. Let me just click on the 3.1.0 version, copy that, and I'll be pasting it over here. All right. And people who are hearing this recording, we are recording this on 2023, the month of July, 7th July, okay, 2023. So as of now, we have the Jakarta already. So if you're in the older version, just go for the Java extra persistence, okay? Now let me do a Control S. It will bring me all the jars and it will download it and it will keep it inside the Maven dependencies. So our Jakarta persistence stuff came here. Let me go over here and do a Control Shift O, and yes, all those imports we got, and our issue has been fixed. Perfect. So we have.
Abhilash, I have
Yes.
a doubt.
Sure.
So I've seen the previous recording. So there we have directly used Hibernate. So
if I have used Hibernate, that's not good. If I have used Hibernate, that's not good, right? Maybe mistakenly I might have done it, Abdul. So you just change it to like Java. If we are in an older project, just change it to Java X.persistence. Okay, but here right now the Java X.persistence has been replaced with Jakarta persistence. Okay, perfect. Now, but yeah, Hibernate has also the same annotations. You can also use it from the Hibernate. Okay, but better just go for the JPA annotations. Okay. Now our entity has been ready. So in my application, what we have to do, let me go to my application. We have to create a student object here, right? We have to create a student object like student, let's say student Abhilash. Okay, is equal to new student, then Abhilash dot set address. Let me just say BLR. And Abhilash dot set mobile, let's say 99999. Then let's say Abhilash dot set name, and the name let's say Abhilash Panigrahi. Okay, now I have this Abhilash object and I have set all these things. What happened here? Create set method. Oh, I haven't saved it. Control S. Okay, now I have this object over here, right? Now we have to save it. Now here comes the thing. If I want to save it, then what I have to do? I have to use, how can I save it? What I need? Data source, because first my application need to connect to the database, right? Yes. My application need to connect to the database so that I can save this object. So first I got one answer from you, data source. What else I need? How can you save this object? What method you have to use?
Persist.
Persist method.
EntityManager.persist.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Entity manager comes from what? JPA or Hibernate or
JPA.
JPA? So let's just do one thing. Let me just create another package first, and this is going to be .dao. Okay, so in my DAO right now, this is my DAO. Let me go with the standard. Let me create an interface. Let's say student DAO. Okay, and inside student DAO, let's say we have one method. Okay, let's say public void save student. Okay, and save student will take a student object and will save it. So let me import it by hitting Control-Shift-O, Control-S, right? Let me give a impl for this new class, and let me say student DAO impl. Okay, and now this need to extends to, or this need to implements what? My interface. So implements student DAO. All right. So now let me just override the unimplemented method. So I have to use this method from my app. I'll go to my app. So I need to create the student object, student DAO object. So I will just use student DAO. Let's say student DAO is equal to new student DAO impl. And let me just copy this guy and just use student DAO.save and just pass in this Avinash object that we have created here. Now let's go to the save student and to the implementation of this. Here we have to give the logic. Okay, how can I save? So I'm getting the student object here, that Avinash object that I have created from my app.java. I'm getting this object right here right now. So which method I'll be using? Persist method to save it. So for that, what I need? Entity Manager. Entity Manager. So Entity Manager. Are we getting the option? Sorry, what I hit. Let me go over there. So far I don't have any dependency. Mark that thing. Entity Manager. I'm getting it from jakarta.persistence. So Entity Manager, and I will be right now taking this and EntityManager.persist, and I'll be persisting the student, and I will be just saying sysout, and I'll be saying record inserted. Okay, cool, done, right? But will it work?
No.
Entity Manager object who will create? Yes. Auto word we have to do. Okay. So that means null pointer exception, because Entity Manager will not be instantiated. Who will be creating the Entity Manager object, right? So Entity Manager object we want it to create by Spring, and for that we need to use auto word or something over here, right? And also here one more thing, in the app.java we are creating the student DAO object by ourselves. We don't want to do that, right? We want a container, a Spring container. We want to give the responsibility to Spring to create the student DAO object, right? And how to do that? By bringing in Spring to our application. We'll tell Spring, hey Spring, we will just use a repository annotation here. So you will create the object of the student DAO impl. You will be creating the object of Entity Manager. Dependency. What dependency? Context dependency. Cool. So that's what I wanted to hear. So let's just go over here and just go to here, bring in a Spring context. Okay, so Spring context, click on this 6.0.10, copy this, go back and paste it, and I'll just move a little to the right, Control S, and now we got all the Spring core, Spring context dependency. So let's just go to now let's just do one thing. Let's just go to our DAO impl. First of all, let's just do a couple of things over here. Let me just maximize it. First thing is I'm going to be using repository annotation. The next thing I will auto word this thing, auto word, and okay, so now it's good, right? So we have all the things. Now we have to get the object for this, right? We want Spring to create the object for this. So what we need a config file because we want Spring to scan this thing. So what we will do, we will go here. You understand, right? We will be needing a config file because it needs to be scanned, because we want to create an application context object right now here. We don't want to create the object by ourselves like this, right? We want to ask Spring about this object like this. Let's say we want to create application context object. So maybe, yeah, let me go with the annotation config application context. Annotation config application context. Let's say this is my container is equal to new annotation config application context, and now to the container only you're going to be asking, right, the student DAO object. You won't be creating like this. So let me delete it. Let me say container dot get bean, because get me the bean of what? Student DAO. So this is the class name. Wow, what is the bean name? What is the bean name? Student DAO Imple. Okay, let's just go over here and let's just say student DAO Imple, and S will be small. And you can also ask student DAO directly, because if this Imple object will be available, it will directly give you, because the DAO implementation is student DAO Imple, right? You can directly ask student DAO Imple, or you can ask also student DAO. If the student DAO Imple is available, it will give you that object. Or let me just make a student DAO Imple, because it will not confuse anyone. So okay, so I'll just say student DAO Imple dot class. Okay, control 1, assign statement to a new local variable, student DAO Imple, and let me just say student DAO here. Okay, and I will just copy this, and yeah, it's just saving it, right? Now can I start my container? Will it work? Right click, run as Java application. Why it will not work?
Configuration class
absolutely. You can see it is giving me a annotation config has not been refreshed yet. So it is saying, okay, you have created a annotation config class, but it has not refreshed, because I don't see any config file over here. So you can just do a container.register, and you can just give your configuration class over here, and then you can just do container.refresh. Okay, otherwise you can do it in one line. How can you do it? You can just provide the configuration class name right here. So why do you need the configuration class? Because this bean will be searched inside the container. And how you want to create the container? I want to create the container using a configuration file. So let me create another package here, another class. This is going to be my, let's say, app config class, app config. And let's just do a finish, and here I will just go ahead and make it a configuration like this. And also I want to activate the component scan. Okay, and that's it. So component scan, I can just scan all the packages starting with com. Let's say Control S. Now I can take this class name and I'll give it to my Spring, my application context, and ask my container that, okay, you use this file to create your container. Now Spring will create the application context going to this file. This file is which one? This file is app config, this one. Right now it will go ahead and scan for all the packages. And now whenever it will scanning all the packages, it will also go to the DAO package. It will find this Imple class, find this repository annotation, and repository by default is having a component, so it will be eligible for component scanning. That object will be going to the Spring container. And now we can go to our application.java, and here we can ask for the bean, right? We are asking for the bean here, that okay, container, get me the bean student DAO Imple. I know you have created the object for that because I have activated the component scanning. I'm getting the object. Now I'm creating a student object. Using this object right now, I'm calling the SEPStudent method. Cool. Control S, Control Shift O to remove all the unnecessary imports. Right click, run as Java application. Let's see if it is working right now. Yeah, new errors. Now tell me how to fix it. Okay, see what we are having. Unsatisfied dependency exception, error creating the bean name called student DAO Imple. It is not able to create our bean for student DAO Imple because there is an unsatisfied dependency expressed through the field called EntityManager. No qualifying bean for jakarta.persistence-api available. It is expecting at least one bean to be available to inject it inside the dependency that we have inside the class called EntityManager. So it is not able to create the bean for student DAO Imple. It's not able to create the object for this because this bean is not able to it is not able to find the bean for EntityManager. It's not available inside the application context. So the auto wearing cannot happen. The dependency injection cannot happen. So how can we create the EntityManager object right now? This is a question for you. Yes.
In the app config, we just like we create bean over there.
object.
Which bean?
EntityManager, then
How can you? Okay.
EntityManager, then
Okay, I have two questions here for you guys. The first question is, Okay, entity manager in Hibernate, if you compare entity manager, it's like what? Session, where you can just do session.save, session.find, session.get, all those things. Like entity manager, you can just use the methods like persist, remove, find, merge, and all these things. This is like a API. Now, this is like our session object. Okay, how to create this entity manager? Who will create me the entity manager?
Entity Manager Factory.
Entity Manager Factory, because you cannot create the entity manager directly. You need an Entity Manager Factory for that. Okay, so Control-Shift-T, Entity Manager Factory. Okay, this is the guy we want to create, right? Control-T here. Okay, it's coming from the jakarta.persistence. Okay, so how to create the Entity Manager Factory right now? I told you one thing. If we are using Spring, we can use a class to create Entity Manager Factory. So what is that class name? I can just write Entity Manager Factory, and before that I can search for local. Let me just write again. Local container or something. Entity Manager
FactoryBean.
EntityManagerFactoryBean, right? What is that? Local container or something like that. Okay, let me just go to the web and search for, let's say, local entity manager local container. Let's write local container Entity Manager Factory Bean. Oh, this is the Spring stuff, huh? You guys are able to hear me? My connection is there or it's dropped? What is keep on searching? Hello, guys, can you hear me?
Recording in progress.
Sorry, I just got disconnected or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know why it is happening. Okay, let me just share again. To create the entity manager, okay, we need a entity manager factory, okay? And to create an entity manager factory, we need some special class, right? A special class like this, local container entity manager factory bean, something like this we have to create, okay? And you can see this is something that I'm trying to find out, because this class will help me to create the entity manager factory. But you can see it is coming from which package? Spring framework.orm. This is a Spring specific class, and the problem is I have not added the Spring support to this Data JPA project. Now the thing is that, okay, I'll come back to two different things right now. Okay, we need to create the entity manager factory, and to create the entity manager factory, we need this class, local container entity manager factory. The local container is like, if you are using any container based application like Spring, go with the local container entity manager factory bean. This is something Spring will give you. This is a class name. You just create the bean for this. And one more thing, if you remember, somebody told me that, okay, Vilas, you are creating an application and you are trying to save an object. Okay, you are trying to save an object, and if you are trying to save that object to the database, you also need a data source. And how to create a data source in Spring? Anybody remember? If like you told me, right? Right over here to the config package. Yes. Can anybody remember the package name, the class name? How to create a data source in Spring? Yes, please. DriverManagerDatasource, Richard. Yes, exactly. So we need to create two things right now. The first thing is that we have a problem here. Our entity manager is not able to. We are not able to instantiate our entity manager. This our student now impl is failing. This entity manager, we are not able to find it out. We have to build a bean for this. Second thing, if also we want to connect to the database, then we need to also we need to have to establish a connection from my application. So we have to create a dv config file. Okay, here inside the config file, let's just do a couple of things. Let's instantiate our entity manager. Let's build our entity manager factory, and let's just create a connection. Okay, first let's just try to create a connection. Okay, let's to set up our connection to the database. So if I want to set up a connection, so what should I do? What bean I have to create? A data source I have to create. For to connect to the database, what I need? A data source. Data source means what? It holds the connection object. So first I need to create a data source to connect to my database. So right now you just told me that I have to create a driver manager data source. You can see driver manager that I have, which will help me to create a connection. But in Spring, I should use something called driver manager data source. That also I'm not finding, because I have to add the Spring support to the JPA. And for that, what I have to use something called a new dependency called Spring ORM. So I'll go over here and we'll look for Spring ORM. Spring ORM, go for this. Spring ORM, go for this. Yes, object relational mapping, click on the latest version, copy this, go back to your application, paste it here, and Control S. And now if I'll go to my db config, let me just go to the db config and close all the other tab. Okay, so here I have to create the connection. I have to build a data source, and also I have to instantiate my entity manager factory. These two beans I have to create. Okay, for connection I have to use what? Driver manager data source, right? Because I have to create a data source, and you can see right now driver manager data source is present, coming from org.springframework.jdbc is your data source. Because if you see the dependency that you have added right now called Spring ORM, and if you go inside the Spring ORM, it's also bringing some Spring JDBC stuff. So this driver manager data source is present inside the JDBC package, right? So that's why you can see right here we'll be setting off the bean for driver manager data source. Here it is driver manager data source. This will help me to build a data source or a connection to my database, and where it is present, link to the editor and see it is present inside the Spring JDBC jar. Okay, it inside this data source package of the Spring JDBC jar. I hope this is making sense. Okay, and the other thing that we are looking for, we need to also instantiate our entity manager. For entity manager to instantiate, we'll be needing something called LocalContainerEntityManagerFactoryBean, and it is also coming from org.springframework.orm.jpa. So that's why I've added that ORM dependency, because this class will help me to set up the entity manager factory from what the entity manager will be created, and I will not get any null pointer for that. Okay, so now let's just go ahead and set up this couple of beans. So first of all, let's just go ahead and set up the connection. So I'll go ahead and set up the connection for my database. So I'll create a bean called driver manager data source. So driver manager data source, I will say data source. Okay, and let's just create the bean for this. Let me just maximize this. Okay, and I will create a bean for this. This will be the connection to my database, and how to basically instantiate the driver manager data source. You guys already know, right? I have to just initialize this class. This is the data source class. Data source is equal to new driver manager data source, and here I have to put my connection related information, right? So data source dot set URL. You have to provide my set URL over here. Data source dot set username, and I have to pass in my username over here for my database, and data source dot set password. Okay, so I'll be connecting to a database. The database is this one, and this is the test01 database. So I'll go over here. First of all, I'll copy the connection to the clipboard, and I'll come over here, put the connection over here, and here my database name is what? My database name is test01. Here I have the student table where the data will go, right? So test01 is my database name. Copy this and paste it over here. The username of mine is root and the password is Avlash. Okay, that's it. And now I will just return the data source object. So now I'm establishing a connection from my application to the
Root 3 flow is there.
sorry.
Root.
3 zeros.
Username.
Oh,
Username.
330. Okay.
Abhilash, I have one question.
Yes.
Actually, here we are using @bean for bean creation, right?
Yes.
That means if you do this annotation, then Spring creates data source bean for us, right?
Exactly, and we'll keep it in the container. So the data source in JDBC, how you create the connection? You remember, Aditi?
Yes.
You have this class called Datasource from java.sql. You do get connection or something, right? Datasource dot create connection, get connection. You pass in 3 parameters, and that's how you create the thing over there. So this is a Spring specific data source class. So this will help you to create the connection. But understand this, in production, never ever use this. Even right? If you go to this, they will mention it somewhere that simple implementation of the standard JDBC data source interface, configuring a plain old JDBC via bean properties and returning a new entry. You can see this is not an actual connection pool. It does not pool the connection. It just serves a simple replacement of a full-blown connection pool, implementing the same standard interface but creating new connection in every call. So basically what it means that Spring is warning you that do not use this class in production, because in production what you need a connection pool where you can, when you are starting your application, right, that time only a lot of connection will be created and those connection will be only reused. But here what will happen, whenever you are setting off the connection from your application to your database, whenever you are, let's say in your application, it will create connection every time. It will, let's say you are going here, right, data impl. Here you are doing a persist. So whenever you are doing a persist, that means what? Your application need to connect to the database. That means what? You need a new connection, right? And that connection will be created fresh, right? And every time if you are creating connection in an application, it is a very bad thing. So in real time, what we do create connection using connection pool. But DriverManager data source is not going to give you any connection pool, right? So you have to set up the connection pool by yourself. But we are doing a simple application right now. That's why I'm going with the DriverManager data source. But it is not advisable to use it in the production. We will change it to some other connection pooling. We will bring in some connection pooling later. But right now, I don't mind if I'm doing any saving, deleting, updating, and every time if my application is creating a new connection, I don't mind because I know it's just a simple application, right? But DriverManager data source right now helping us to connect to the database because we are giving our connection properties over here. That's it. Simple. Yeah. Yes.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, still I have one.
Yes, Aditi. Yeah.
Actually, here we can't use the @auto because even for model mapper also, we use @bean annotation, right? We don't do like auto thing.
Yes. So basically.
So what is that? I have that confusion.
Yeah. So basically, we will see that we will see two things. So here, Aditi, the connection object, the DriverManager data source object, will not be created by Spring. If Spring is creating this object automatically, it is available inside the application context or inside the container. You can just directly create the data source object and make it @auto-word, right?
If it gets created by application context, then container, then we can use
auto-word, right? Now, once you have this object, you can go to any of your class and you can just go and do it. DriverManager data source. Here you can just do @auto-word right now because it is available inside the container right now. But from here you can just do data source.getConnection to get the connection. But right now, that object we have created, that's why you will be able to use the at AutoAdd, right?
Yes.
But we have to create the bean for this. So, okay.
But Abhilash, how do we know that?
So right now it's a simple trace application we are creating. No Spring Boot, nothing. So, so we need to create the bean for that. Driver manager bean we have to create. Okay. So it's like everything we are building from fresh. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. So like the data source, as I said, we are also having, whenever we are launching up our application, if you remember, we are also having another problem. If I'll go to my app.java, where is my app? Here. So here also, if I'll go and launching up my application, we are getting another problem. What is that problem? Anyone? EntityManager bean. If you see here, inside the student.dao impl, it is not able to create the object because the EntityManager bean is not available. Now we have to also create the EntityManager bean. Okay, EntityManager, you guys told me that it will be created from the EntityManager factory. In Spring, we have one more class which will help us to create the EntityManager factory, and that is called LocalContainerEntityManagerFactoryBean. Okay, this is the object you have to create, right? I'll copy this. You can see internally it is using EntityManagerFactoryBean. If you go over here, you can see abstract one is basically helping you to create factory of EntityManager factory. See, this bin only you want to create, right? You told me if you want to create the entity manager, you want to create it from the entity manager factory. You can just do entity manager factory.create entity manager, and it will help you to create the entity manager, right? So you can do all your save, delete, update, all the operation from the entity manager, but to create the entity manager, you need the entity manager factory. But in Spring, the way we create the entity manager factory, not by directly entity manager factory is equal to new entity manager factory. You won't do it. You do it like this. In Spring, how they do it? They do it by using this factory bean. You can see there is a class called factory bean, and they have this entity manager factory within this diamond bracket. So factory bean is a Spring specific class, if I'm not wrong. Is it Spring specific? Yes. So it is a whenever like you want to create any factory object in Spring, like bean factory, session factory, entity manager factory, then you need to utilize this bean. This is a special interface which will help you to create the factory related bean or object. So we're going to be using this factory bean. This one we came from where? If I'll go back, we came from here, local container entity manager factory bean. This implements to this class, and this class is implementing to factory bean or whatever. We don't give a damn about it. I don't want to get confused. Let me just close all this thing, and let me go to my config file, the db config file, and here let me just create a entity manager factory object. So as I said, in Spring, how can I do it? I have to use local container entity manager factory bean. Okay, you can see also there are classes called entity, let's say a star entity manager factory. Okay, so there should be a class called local entity manager factory bean. There is another class called local container entity manager factory bean. Remember, whenever you are using any standalone application, you can go for the local entity manager factory bean. But in Spring is basically a container. Spring is providing us a container. So for container based application, we can go for local container entity manager factory bean. Okay, so let me just create the bean for this to create my entity manager factory, and I can just go over here and I can just right now do entity manager factory bean I want to create, and then I will just return this object, right? Let me maximize it, and let me just start creating the object for this. So let me create the bean first of all. This bean is for my entity manager factory, and now I will be instantiate this object. So I'll instantiate it. Let's say entity manager factory is equal to, one second, guys, please be on mute. Everyone try to be on mute. Just check if you're not muted. Yeah. So I'm creating the bean for this. Okay, now I'm creating the entity manager factory bean. To my entity manager factory bean, what should I tell? I will tell, okay, you want to create the entity manager factory bean. Okay, So this is the connection to my database, emap dot set data source. Okay, entity manager factory. This is your data source that you want to use. This is the data source, right? Copy this, call it over here. Okay, to my entity manager factory bean, I'm telling, okay, what's my data source? What else I have to do? Entity manager. Okay, entity manager is what, guys? Entity manager from the entity manager factory, you're gonna be creating the entity manager. Okay, so your entity manager is basically doing what? Anyone? Entity manager. Yes. What is that? What is that? What is that? You are saying something. No, you just said something. Entity manager is what?
Using DB operations.
Yes, man, is doing some DB operation. But entity manager, fill the word. So what it is managing? Entity, right? Entity manager, as I told, this is the persistence context. Persistence context means entity manager. Persistence context means only entity manager. Entity manager means persistence context. It is basically managing some entity inside that persistence context, right? So it is managing the entity. So from where it will get the entity? So we will be just doing packages to scan, and here inside the packages to scan we'll be giving our entity package where our entities are there. So this is my entity package where the entities like student is there, right? So I will go copy this name. So in this package only I'll store all my entity. The package where you are storing all your entity, give that package information to your entity manager factory. Okay, so right here, so whenever you are creating a factory, this is where I'm keeping all my entities. So that's it. Just return this one. Okay, there you go. Your entity manager factory bean is ready, right? Cool. So you have, yeah.
So the data source, which entity is all this table, which use this data source only.
Exactly, exactly. So basically,
we have different data source, so we can give.
Good question, Lipika. Very good questions. Right now, see, we are creating one entity manager factory. We are creating this entity manager factory from this data source. Data source means what? Your connection information to the database. Right now I have one database. You might have many database, right? If you have many database, you might have different data source configuration like this. Control C, again Control B. Here it is test2 database from let's say Oracle or something, right? You have your username goes here, your password goes here, and you are creating another entity manager factory bean for that and giving that data source to that. So yeah, so whenever you are creating any entity manager factory, make sure, so that's why it is good. Okay, I'll show you. This question basically brings me a lot of different points. We're going to be talking about that in a little after a couple of minutes. But yeah, we have the entity manager bean factory done right now. We're just giving the data source and packages to scan over here. That's it. Okay, few more things I'm going to tell you in a minute. So I think all good, right? So now everything is okay. So all happy, right? My student DAO object right now will be created because the entity manager is available, because the entity manager will be created from the entity manager factory. I have written it auto-word. So let's see that if Spring is able to create the entity manager for me. Okay. So Control-Shift-O. Let's just go to the app.java. Let's just do a right click. Let's just do run. Let's see like if my student object is getting saved right now. See if it is a new error or a same error. Understand the exception and just let me know. Creating bean name with entity manager factory bean defined in the class blah blah blah. No persistence provider specified for the entity manager factory bean configuration. And choosing persistence unit info does not specify a provider class name either. So what do you understand over here? It is saying does not specify a provider class name either. It is a saying no persistence provider specified. What do you understand from here? No persistence provider specified. What do you understand from here? Yeah.
And implementation, please say that is Hibernate.
Exactly. Right now it is saying, okay, how can I function, man? You have just added JPA. Okay. But for the entity manager, what is the implementation? You know what? I cannot function by myself, right? I am JPA. You are creating an entity manager factory here, right here. Where is that? Where is that? config file, dvconfig, right? You are creating an entity manager factory here, but yeah, how can I function, right? You need to tell me who is the provider. Is it JPA, is it Hibernate, is it Eclipse Link, it is MyBatis, or what? And for that, you have to add one more property here, emap.set provider class. Okay, you can see set provider, set persistence provider. You can add the persistence provider here, or you can alternatively also add the vendor information directly. You can just use like emap.set, set JPA vendor adapter. Okay, any of these things will be fine. Okay, set JPA vendor adapter, and who will be my vendor? My vendor will be who? Hibernate. Okay, let's say new Hibernate JPA vendor adapter. Okay, so I'm saying, okay, my vendor will be Hibernate. Okay, so I'm specifying my vendor over here. Let's just do a control S. Let's just go to app.java. Let's run this one more time. Let's see if it is a new error or it's running fine. Okay, another time, new error. Understand the error right now. Bean creates an exception, error creating the bean name EntityFactoryBean, and it is saying dvconfig class failed to instantiate LocalContainerEntityManagerFactoryBean, the bean that I have created. Factory method this. The problem is, through an exception, org.hibernate session it is trying to create. If you come and scroll down, you can see it's failing to instantiate this bean. You can see there is a problem here. Org.hibernate.session. See what error it is? Class not found. What class it is trying to instantiate? Scroll all the way. See, it is trying to instantiate a class called session, because entity manager behind the scene will create a Hibernate session because you are using Hibernate, right? So it will create a session so that you can just do some session related stuff here. But it is not instantiating session because there is a class not found error, and it is saying the session class of Hibernate is not found. Why? Class not found. Why? Why class not found?
We have to add it in Maven.
Dependency we have to add. Hibernate dependency we have to add. Correct? So let's just go to here and go to the pom.xml and let's just bring Hibernate core. So go back to here and let's just do Hibernate core, search for this and go to here, go to the Hibernate dependency, copy this, Control C. Okay, go back and paste it here, right? This is your Hibernate core and Control S. Let's bring in this one. And now can I go to my app.java and run this one more time? Run it. Run as Java application. Are we getting any same error or different error? Now you see the error again. Let me, just give me a minute, guys. Yes, so what is the problem right now? SQL exception, no suitable driver found. MySQL driver. So we are connecting our database. We are connecting our project to the database. Which database? MySQL database. So our driver is not present, right? So we have to add the MySQL driver here. So let's just go over here and let's just search for MySQL connector and just connect the MySQL driver. Copy this. Copy the MySQL driver, come back, paste it over here, Control V, let me just resize it a little bit, Control S, there you go. Let me go to my app.java class. Let's right now try to persist the student object. Run as Java application. Will it work? I don't think so. Problem. Now you see, error, unsatisfied dependency exception again. Now again it is saying, student.DAO impl, you will not be able to creating because the entity manager, no qualifying being found for the entity manager. So what is the problem happening right now, guys? It is saying that student.DAO, whenever I'm asking for the student.DAO impl object, the student.DAO impl object is not getting created because this is not getting auto-word. But I told that the entity manager will be created from the entity manager factory. So you can see in the app.java, dvconfig.java right here, I told you that whenever you're creating the entity manager factory, you are basically creating the entity manager factory out of what the entity manager will be created. But it is saying the entity manager is right now not present because the bean does not exist for that. So what we have to do? The entity manager bean is not present, so auto-wed cannot happen. So what we can do over here? Can we come over here and create a entity manager bean like this? Entity manager, and should we create a bean like what is that? Entity manager entity manager factory, right? So we can right now auto-wed the entity manager factory, and should we do like entity manager factory dot create entity manager, and we have to, it will give us the entity manager right now, and we have to return this entity manager, and we have to create a bean. Do you think I have to do this? Okay, if you think I have to create a bean like this, right now I have entity manager bean, right? So do you think the problem will go away? No.
No, yesterday you said like if you are creating, then it will
Exactly. We don't have to create this entity manager bean like this by ourselves. Right now, for your satisfaction, I have created the entity manager bean, right? How to create the entity manager bean? From the entity manager factory only, right? We have already created the entity manager factory. So this will be auto-wed. So no worries. So this will be auto-wed. So auto-wed. Okay. This will be auto-wed, right? Because the object I have already created, this guy will create me the entity manager factory. It is already there in my container. I'm auto-wedding it, taking it, creating an entity manager over here and returning it. So now see, like if this bean will be injected over here, I feel still you're going to be getting the same exception. Right click, run as Java application, and you will be seeing you're going to be getting the same. It is saying record inserted, but it like the entity manager bean is present right now. Okay. Because I have created the entity manager manually over here. It is saying record inserted, but I am sure that you will not get any record over here. See, you are not getting record because now here comes two things. Now everyone, please just get a little bit, just get serious right now, because I'm going to be telling you a couple of different things, and from now on the drama start. Look at that. Right now the first thing is this bean you don't have to create. You don't have to create the entity manager bean by yourself. Okay. If you will not create, then that auto-wearing will not happen, right? This auto-wearing will not happen, and whenever you will go to app.java, if you're going to be running this will fail. It will tell, okay, the bean doesn't present, the bean is not present, so you will not be able to auto-wear. So no such bean definition will come for entity manager. Okay, cool. So remember one thing, you cannot auto-wear an entity manager. How true is that line? Yesterday I have done the auto-wearing whenever we are doing some Spring Boot project, right? You can do auto-wearing, but there is some special condition. We'll be coming back to that. We can do that in Spring Data JPA. We have not introduced Spring Data JPA yet. So you cannot do auto-wearing in Entity Manager. Sorry? No. And auto-wearing you cannot do right now. As of now, whatever we have done, Vijay, auto-wearing will not work. Okay. But I told you that we have already created the object for Entity Manager Factory, right? In our DB config here, this guy. Okay. Now, what I want to inject a Entity Manager object to this guy. Okay. Entity Manager is a Spring thing or a Java thing? Entity Manager is a Spring stuff or a Java stuff, guys? Java stuff, right? It is there since 2006, if I'm not wrong. And to instance, see, and one more thing, guys. Like your session, Entity Manager is also not thread safe. Okay, to make it thread safe, and just forget about the thread safe stuff. Just understand this much. If you want to initialize or inject the Entity Manager, you have to use a special annotation. Entity Manager is what? Entity Manager is what? It's a persistence context. I told you, right? Just use the annotation here called persistence context. This. From where it is coming? Jakarta.persistence. From the JPA, right? Now I'm using this annotation. Okay? And I feel right now that dependency thing will not come. You can also do auto wearing, but I'll show you when. Okay? But now I'm just using this annotation. Control S. Okay. Now do you feel it will work? Persistence context, you know, the entity is a entity manager itself called a persistence context. persistence context is a place which basically contain different entities, right? It's basically takes the responsibility of persisting of an entity or doing different stuff. It's like a container, I told you already. So now I will just do a control S, okay? And now what I will do, I will go back to the dev config. I'll go back to the app.java and let's just run this, hoping for some new exception at least, not the same exception. Okay, now there is something new. Looks like Entity Manager Factory is initialized by JPA, which is a cool thing, and it is saying unit as default. What do you mean by unit as default? Unit as default means, guys, Lipika was just asking me this question few minutes back. So whenever we are creating an Entity Manager Factory, it is getting created from a specific data source. Now this is the data source, this is the database we want to connect. This is the package that it has to scan. This is the adapter or vendor adapter that we have given. Now we can have many Entity Manager Factory in our application, which uses different types of data source. Let's say I have 2-3 different database. One is Oracle, one is MySQL, one is something else. Then maybe I'll have 3 data source. I'll be having 3 Entity Manager Factory.Bean, right? So right now you can see, right now this Entity Manager that we are having here, right here, this is created out of what? Out of the Entity Manager Factory. Who is that Entity Manager Factory? This guy, right? So you can see we are just having this one. Entity Manager Factory for the persistence unit default. Now we are creating the Entity Manager Factory out of this. Now this is what we call a persistence unit. I can set up the Entity Manager persistence unit here. Set persistence unit name, and I can say anything. Let's say MySQL something, MySQL DB or something. I'm just saying something. Okay, so this is the unit information where I have all this stuff configured as per the MySQL stuff I have configured over here to connect to the MySQL DB. So this is what we call the persistence unit. We have not specified anything, that's why it is saying default. Just wanted to let you know, if you're gonna come to here, this persistence context has been created from the persistence unit what? Let me just mention it here. It has been created from the unit, whatever the unit name you have given there, just give it over here. If you don't want to give also, that's fine, but just want to tell you this persistence context we are creating out of this persistence unit, MySQL DB. What is this persistence name? Persistence name, we have just given an alias name to this set of configuration that we have done. You can just make it anything, okay? That doesn't matter, right? If you don't even give anything, this will be like, default. Default over here. Now if I'll run my application one more time, you will see like this persistence unit will change to MySQL DB. We'll get the same exception. Okay, you can see now we are using the persistence unit MySQL DB. Our Entity Manager Factory has been initialized, but there is a problem. Why there is a problem? Because this persistence context annotation that we have used, what it is saying, try to understand. Now this is the question, Repti, you asked me. Now try to understand here. What is the problem? Transaction required exception. No entity manager with actual transaction available with the current thread cannot process the persist call. It is saying in the Java line number 22 in the student impl class. Click on that. This line is causing me the problem. Why it is causing me? Add transactional I have to use. Why I have to use add transactional? Because guys, whenever you are using this persistence context, right? So there is something which has been set up by default. There is something called a persistence context type. The default is transaction. So that means if you are using persistence context, if you are using entity manager, by default is setting the transaction need to be activated if you are saving something. Okay. So the transaction type is automatically set over there. So I have to use a transactional annotation. So whenever I'll do a persist, the begin will happen from here, the transaction begin will happen from here, and the commit will happen after the method end, right here. Okay. So cool. So now I have a transactional here, right? Can I run this right now? Will it work? Okay, this is not Spring Boot, right? The transaction you are writing here and automatically the transaction manager is getting set up for you. No, it will not happen. you have to configure the transaction manager, right? So there is something called a transaction manager. If I'll go over here, called transaction manager. Come on, do you have it? Yeah, jakarta.transaction, spring framework.transaction. Okay, let me go to here. Okay, this is the implementation anyhow. The transaction manager, guys, this will help you to set up a transaction, but this is the interface. What is the class name? Control T. You have lot of transaction manager right now. JDBC transaction manager, Hibernate transaction manager, JPA transaction manager, JTA transaction manager. What I'll be using? I'm using JPA, right? For JPA, I don't want to use Hibernate or JDBC directly. I don't want to use that. So I'll either use this JTA transaction manager or JPA transaction manager. This is a like you can say transaction manager. They have another class in Spring called platform transaction manager, which is the interface. Now for this we have few implementation: JPA transaction manager and JTA transaction manager. So basically I have to do this. Let me go over there. I have to create another bean called transaction manager. Okay, transaction manager. Okay, this one transaction manager I can use, or I can just use the other one called platform transaction manager. If you go to the platform transaction manager, it is extending to the transaction manager. This is also an interface, right? But it has few implementation: JPA transaction manager, JTA transaction manager. Which one I'll be using? Yes, this is the interface.
JPA transaction manager.
Why you are saying JPA? Now tell me the reason.
Because for example, if we use Hibernate, it will be Hibernate specific. Like JPA, I think it uses we can whenever we change to MyBetis or
I understand it. You don't want to go Hibernate specific, so you are choosing JPA transaction manager. Why you haven't told? Okay, well, let's go ahead and use JTA transaction manager. So what if I'll use JTA transaction manager? Do you think there is any difference between these classes? Guys, anyone? Do you guys feel there is any difference between the class? What transaction? Transaction manager job is to give you the transaction management facility to your application. You can use a transactional. Okay, that's good. Now tell me, when should you? So here I can create any. I have two classes, right? I can create JPA transaction manager. JPA transaction manager is equal to new JPA transaction. I don't give a damn what code they have written behind the scene. I will just return this. I will just return this class, right? Cool. It works, right? And here I just need to tell to the JPA transaction manager. I have to, what is that? JPA transaction manager. I have to just set the entity manager factory. Okay. And my entity manager factory is this guy, right? Control C. Just give the bean name of your entity manager factory. That's it. Okay. Or if you want to do this, that also fine if you're directly calling it. But if you say, okay, Vilas, you have already created a bean, right? Why you are calling that method directly? Okay, you can just write entity manager factory over here. It will be automatically auto-word entity manager factory. Let's say entity manager factory, and give this entity manager factory over here. You are already creating the entity manager factory over here, right? So that means that bean is available, and this will be automatically auto-word over here. Whenever you are writing anything in the parenthesis, whenever this bean will be created, this guy will be automatically word. This dependency will be automatically injected. When Spring will call this method, they will inject this dependency, right? So you don't need to even write auto-word. If the parameter is there, you are writing at bean. So when Spring is creating the bean for this object will be automatically injected, and you are basically giving it over here. And the same object, from where Spring will be injecting this, because we already created the object for the entity manager factory right here. Cool. So my transaction manager is created. But my question is that I asked to Vijay that why I'm using JPA transaction manager. I could have used JTA transaction manager also, right? Remember that. It's not like I'm blindly choosing JPA transaction manager. I'll be telling you the difference. Whenever you are connecting to one database, use JPA transaction manager. Whenever you are using multiple databases, right? Let's say you have different databases, go with the JTA transaction manager. There are some differences also. We'll talk about it. So it's not like I'm blindly choosing one. For now, it is a demo session. We're just choosing the JPA transaction manager. Later, while we're going in depth, we will be just doing other stuff, right? So remember that I'm creating my transaction manager bean over here. Okay, this will help me to manage my transaction. Let me go to my app.java one more time. Run this. This time My transaction is also there. Let's see if it is working. Okay, I've set up my transaction manager. Okay, still we are having the same problem.
You have to enable it in the
exactly. So right now the transaction bean I have created, but I have to tell Spring, hey, go ahead and use transaction manager. So enable transaction management, right? Control S, Control Shift O. Okay, finger crossed. I think we're almost done. Java application. Come on, man. Okay. No, bean not required type exception. Student now, but actually it is found. Okay. So it is saying we are directly calling there is some proxy related exception. I don't want to go in depth of it. Follow my proxy session. The problem is I'm directly asking for the implementation object. Okay. Let me just change it to student DAO. Let me just do it student DAO class. Okay. Now it is automatically going to give me the implementation object, right? Because for the student DAO, the implementation is student DAO impl, right? So I'm directly asking for the implementation object previously, the student DAO impl object. Now asking directly the interface class. It will basically give me the student impl class only, right? Let's see right now. Let's run this. No bean named called student DAO available. Okay. Okay. That is, let's say student DAO, no bean name available. Let me just go to the student DAO impl. This is my student DAO impl. One second. This is my student DAO impl. Can I just come over here, go to my application.java. Can I just say student DAO impl.class? Okay. Student DAO impl, the bean related issue. Okay, one second. Can I get the student DAO bean like this? Run this. Bean name called student DAO impl. Is it so?
Student DAO.
We have
Dot class.
not specific bean.
Dot.
It is bean name equal to.
Bean name equal to we can give, but yeah, if we are not giving bean name, by default the student DAO impl name will be student s small, right? So student DAO. Okay, let's just do one thing. Let me remove this. Okay, we will figure out that later. Okay, now we have our student DAO impl, right? No problem. We are not implementing that interface, right? The student DAO interface, so that's fine. Okay, Control C. Go to the after Java, report back my code. Student DAO impl. Just some basic Spring we're messing up. Okay, student DAO impl. Okay, now my class name is what? Student DAO impl. Copy this. Go to my app.java. Give my bean name here. Student DAO impl. Okay. Now we are just asking for the student DAO impl class. Get me the student DAO impl object. And I'll just say student DAO impl. Okay, and I will just do student DAO impl dot save student. Right now, Spring, you are happy, right? We are not using any interface, so we'll go into that why we got that error, right? We don't want to mess it up right now. Run this. There you go. Come on, man. Record sept. Now let's see whether it is actually sept. Run this. There you go. Okay. Now we have successfully injected the record to the database, right? And we have used all sort of configuration. We are asking our container the student DAO impl, getting the student DAO object, calling the save method, and this save method is doing the work for me right now. Okay, understanding it, what configuration that we have done. But now one more question that I have. Okay, so far, like you guys have at least some idea, right? What we have done, guys? Yes, no? Like you have
writing in db config the methods we can write in app config, right?
Come again. db config method.
You have created another class.
Yeah, Vijay. Because I just want to maintain the standard. You can have one class also, but I want to keep my data. If you want to even let me just bring in this app config to the config folder. If you want to even, create another configuration file for Datasource, another configuration file for EntityManager, then also it's fine. Okay, not a problem. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Any other questions? What do you have? What do you have in your mind right now so far? Yes. I want to hear your feelings. Yes.
Abhilash,
Yes, Digna.
why you are using JPA instead of JTA something?
Yeah. So basically, Digna, we're gonna be having a complete session on that. For now, you understand. JPA Transaction Manager I have used because I have only one database. Okay. I am connecting to my MySQL database, right? That's it, right? But later we're going to be using multiple data source, multiple databases. That time we will be using JTA. So in your application, if you have multiple databases, then you go with the JTA Transaction Manager. Okay, thumb rule. But right, we're going to be having so many conversation. Don't get me wrong, my statement wrong. But yeah, I'm going to be proving why I'm saying this thing. Okay.
Abhilash, can you please scroll to the top?
Scroll to the top. Yes.
Yeah. Down. So here we are explicitly passing in at line number 36, we are explicitly passing in the package it needs to scan for all this entity, right?
Exactly.
So, but in Spring we do not do that, right? We don't specify where all our entities are. It automatically does that. So
exactly. So basically, that time the local container entity manager FactoryBean basically did it will not do that. It will not automatically do that. Only when you are following the Spring Boot structure, then only it will do that. Otherwise, you might have heard about an annotation called EntityScan. You have to use that annotation. I'm going to be showing you that. Whenever you are creating the entity manager just remember one thing, guys. Be very serious about this EntityScan thing. The entities that we have in our application, the entities that we have over here with 8 entity, that thing will not be automatically considered as like your application the context scan, what we say that the component scan will not happen with this, right? You need to make sure your application context is also holding the entity, and for that, when we are telling Spring to create different things for us, 1 second, guys, just be on the line. If you have office, you can drop up, but I'll just continue discussing for 10 15 minutes more. Just give me a minute, guys. Yes, everybody here. So guys, if you have office, you can drop off. My sister is calling because she has to go to her office. I have to drop off. But yeah, I'll talk for another 10 minutes, guys, because I don't want to leave you guys in the midway. I want to show you one more thing. But very good question here. See, this entity thing, you have to tell your entity manager where this entity things are there. You have to do it how? By writing this packages to scan. You have it, right? Packages to scan, where we had that, the dbconfig file right here. If in Spring Boot, if you also have to do that using a special annotation called @EntityScan. I'll show you how it is, right? We'll be going into that. So okay, so far I think you have little bit of things in your mind, but yeah, I will just show you 2 magic thing over here. Okay, now yeah.
Just one question.
Yes. Ask me too.
The main application,
main application.
Where we are calling that
JavaScript. Yes.
Student. Yeah. So do we need to do that object to create like student Abhilash equal to new student?
Yeah, that object you have to create. Yeah. You have to create that object, Livika.
Okay.
Because that object, is a object that you want to persist.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's an entity class. Okay, that class is an entity, but we are creating that student to save.
Exactly. Now I have few questions for you. Okay, just let me have a little bit of water.
Yes,
Oh, Chaitanya. Hi, Chaitanya. How are you first? You tell me. Long time. Yeah. Tell me, Chaitanya. Yeah.
Here there is a config class, right? We can directly use at the rate of components now.
Yes.
Instead of accepting components.
No, the entity will not be component scan. Basically, Chaitanya, you have to use a special.
Here, components scan also is coming from Spring Center. That local bean also is coming from Spring.
Yeah, but Spring does not. This entity will not be scanned using this component scan. Just remember that much. Okay. You need to use base packages to scan the way that I have told you. Otherwise, there is one more way to do it. I'm going to be showing you that right now. Here are a few things quickly. Let me just try to complete. Let's see if I can do it in 10 minutes. But yeah, if you have Office, you guys can drop off. Okay, let me just show you a few things. Now, guys, tell me two problem we had so far, or two problem which is not resolved. The first question might be, okay, Vilas, you are using persistence context. Why can't you use @AutoAdd, right? First thing is that I want to use @AutoAdd. Vijay was asking me, right? I have to use @AutoAdd. Then why can't I use it? Question number one. You know that if I'm using AutoAdd, I'm going to be getting an exception. It will not work, right? It will tell you, right, that an object will not be created, blah, blah, blah. Unsatisfied dependency expressed through EntityManager, blah, blah, blah. Okay. First question is that. So I want to use EntityManager like this. AutoAdd I want to use. Then how can I do that? Okay. And I feel for that, I have to introduce a guy. And that guy name is Spring Data JPA. It's not only because I want to use AutoAdd here. I want to do some more cool thing. I'll tell you in a minute. And this is the most interesting part. I'll go to the pom.xml right now. I want to bring the Spring Data JPA because it's special right now for us. So Spring Data JPA, go to that Spring Data JPA, click on this 3.1.1, go to the Spring Data JPA, copy this guy and paste it over here. This is the Spring feature of the JPA. Okay, and we'll see how it is going to help us. Now we go to the app.java. Okay, run this one more time. Nothing will work. The same issue you're going to be having, but I feel like, you have to do one more thing. You have to go to the dev config. Hey, my recording is happening, right? Okay. So you have to go to the dev config and you have to use the annotation called @enable
Data JPA.
Data JPA. What is that? Enable Data JPA? No, Enable JPA repository. I'll tell you what this guy will do. This is a very special annotation that we have. And this Enable JPA repository will do magic for you right now. I'll show you how. Okay, now let's go to app.java. Okay, I think we are ready. Okay, no EntityManager fact. Okay. Now you see, now whenever we're enabling the EntityManager, enable data JPA over there, Spring is telling me something. No bean named EntityManager Factory is available. So it is saying EntityManagerFactoryBean is not available, but we have already created the EntityManagerFactoryBean over here, right? So now we have to do a special thing here. Just change the bean name to whatever it is saying, okay? Because Spring is looking for this thing behind the scene. It is doing certain stuff. It is needing an EntityManagerFactoryBean. So my bean name is different. If I don't have any bean name for my EntityManagerFactory. So by default, what is my bean name? Anyone? Here, what is my bean name? In this bean, if I want to change my bean name to EntityManagerFactory, then what should I do?
@bean, the name you can give, that is first option.
The name you can give is the first option. What is the second option?
You can change the name of the method.
Exactly. Thank you. Worked, right? Worked. Let's go over there. There you go. Second record. Now the AutoWare is working, right? Now the AutoWare is working, right? Right here, it's working. Okay. One last thing. I cannot go without saying this thing. I know my sister is gonna kill me today because I'll be late. But yeah, one last thing. Okay. The cool feature of JPA you want to see. Now see, you are writing the save student, right? Right here. By yourself because you want to save a student. What about if I'll tell you, okay, help me to write a method which will help me to delete a record. Then how will be doing it? If you want to delete a record, then how will be doing it? If you want to find, let's say, I'll tell you, okay, help me to find all the record from the database. Then what you will do? You'll come over here. You'll write a method, right? Public void, yeah, public list of student, and you'll be writing like what? Find all student, and you will be returning the list of student. You know what you'll be doing, and again you're going to be using EntityManager dot find. They will be giving you a specific student. Maybe create query you can use, right? What is that? Create query. Create query. You have to give your query name from student, that is your entity name. JPQL query you have to add. Then you have to write student.class. It is going to give you a typed query, assign statement to a new local variable, typed query. This is the query that you have created. Then you have to run this query by doing query.getResultList, and this is going to help you to return the list of student. Control 1, assign statement to a new local variable. This is your result list. You can return this, right? Cool. Now you can call this method. This is gonna get you all the students that you have, right? Can we test it quickly? Copy this. app.java. Can we come over here? I want to call this method. You can just use this impl dot findAll. Control S. Relaunch the application. Okay. Record inserted. Oh, we are not printing it. Control 1, assign statement to a new local variable, find all student. Let's say this one, I'll say all student, and I can just iterate over it. So I can say all student dot for each, and I can just do student, and I want to print all the students. So sysout and student, right? Now this is going to help me to print all the students that I have in the database. So this is another, okay, what is the issue? What is the issue here? Student sysout. Change, the JRE is 1.5, right? Now I can go to, I can go to pom.xml, and I have to get inside the properties. I have to add my compiler label. I'll go to here, let's say Java compiler, Java Maven, Java 8 compiler, and I'm gonna be copying the source, copy this couple of things, Control C, go over there and paste it over here, changing it to, let's say 17, or what is that? Let me use 17 here, or 19 here. Okay, 19, Java 19 I want to use, Control S, and now I will just update my Maven, update project, let it use Java 19 here, Java 19. So I'll go over here to the app.java, and I think it is gone. Now let me just try to launch this, and this will help me to print all the students. Is it? Yes. Now all my students are getting printed here, which is cool. Here I have written a utility method by myself, isn't it? Find all by all student. Now like that, if I'll tell you, okay, find me a specific student, remove a student, delete a student, find a particular student by ID, then what you have to do? You have to keep on writing all these methods for me, right? You will be writing the method. You will be writing the save method. You will be writing the code. You will be writing find all student method. You will be writing the code. How basically the student will be fetched from the database. That's what you're going to be doing. You as a developer will be doing that. If you don't want to do this, okay, then this is the cool thing. I will just, okay, I will comment it out everything that I have. Now what I will do, I'll go to a DAO class. Just create a DAO interface. No need to write anything inside here. Remove everything, okay? No need to write anything. Now I will implement something here. Extends JPA repository. Okay, two things you have to do. First, the entity name. What is my entity name? My entity name is student, right? Student. This is your entity name. Just define your entity name inside the diamond bracket, And what is the type of your primary key? My primary key is ID and the type is integer. Copy that. Go to your the DAO class that you have created, okay, and define the entity name and the type of the primary key. Now my entity name is student and the type of the primary key is integer. Now everything, right, lot of methods will be given by Spring only. I'll tell you, I don't have any DAO impl class, right? I have commented out the code. I have a simple DAO class, and now I have given it a superpower by implementing this interface. Okay, I just told you that when your interface student DAO extends to the JPA repository, your interface will get some superpower. What kind of superpower? The superpower is you don't even have to write a single line of code to do any CRUD operation with the student entity, right? For the student entity, if you want to save a student, delete a student, update a student, merge a student, remove a student, for whatever you want to do, this JPA repository will make sure to make those methods available for you. Now you don't have to write a student DAO implementation like you did in a couple of minutes before. You don't have to write this class. So this kind of code is not required. So for an example, if you want to write a save method, well, you have to write this much of code and this is not required. If you want to find all the students, you have to write this much of code. This is not required. Why it is not required? For an example, right now you have a student DAO impl because you want to save student, delete student, update student, blah, blah, blah. So you are writing the save method, you are writing the findAll method and blah, blah, blah. But what about if you want to write a employee DAO impl? What about you have to write a book DAO impl? What about if you want to write a doctor DAO impl? You have to do the exact same thing. You have to auto-where the entity manager and then you have to save the employee. You have to find all the employee. For the doctor, it is also same. Save the doctor, find all the doctor. For book, it will be same. Save the book, find all the books from the library. It's like you have to call the same persist method for the student entity, same persist method for the doctor entity. If you want to save a doctor object, same persist method to a lawyer entity. If you want to save a lawyer, same for the find all student method as well. If you want to find all the doctors, if you want to find all the employees, if you want to find all the teachers, then you have to do the exact similar kind of thing. And that's what Spring don't want you to do. Spring is saying that no need to write this impl class right now because I will create this impl class for you. And what you have to do, you have to just extend to this JPA repository and you have to make sure you are telling me for what entity you are trying to generate the DAO impl. And I will basically create a impl class for you on the go, on the fly, right? And that superpower is coming from this interface called JPA repository. And this is what we call a repository concept. The repository, the JPA repository is called a repository. Why? Because if you go to the JPA repository, if you can go to the hierarchy, you can see the JPA repository extends to the list CRUD repository, the list CRUD repository extends to the CRUD repository, the CRUD repository extends to the repository. So repository is a interface, it's a marker interface. We're going to be learning about a lot of different things about it. But you understand, the Spring will create the implementation for all your repository classes. Right now, your interface that you have written called student DAO is also a repository interface because it extends to JPA repository and JPA repository internally extends to the repository. So Spring will take care of writing the implementation class for your repository interface called student DAO, right? And inside that implementation class, so Spring will generate the implementation for this. So inside that implementation, what Spring will do, Spring will just write the save method logic, delete method logic, update method logic, and blah, blah, blah method logic so that you can do CRUD operation with your entity called student. Why Spring is going to write that? Because if you're going to see, if you go into the JPA repository, you can see you have a lot of methods like flush, save and flush, lot of things like you can see over here, delete something in batch. Then you have a lot of methods like find all, Okay, and if you go to the JPA repository, it extends to some other interface. Let's say list CRUD repository. If you're going over here, you can also find a lot of methods here called findAll by ID, right? If you want to find all the objects which are available in your database through ID. If you go to the CRUD repository, which is internally extended by the list CRUD repository, you're going to be finding some more CRUD feature like saving an entity, saving all the entity, finding an entity by ID. If an entity exists, you can find it by exist by ID method. You can find all method is there, right? Find all by ID method is there. So there is a count method there if you want to count how many records are present inside the database. So there are a lot of methods present here inside all these interfaces that you're going to see, like CRUD repository, which is extended by list CRUD repository. List CRUD repository is extended by JPA repository, and JPA repository is extended by our interface. So as our interface is extending to this, all those methods are coming to this interface for free of cost. Now you might say, okay, Avilash, okay, I can see this JPA repository also, let's consider this, but this is an interface, right? It doesn't have anybody. Let's say flush method. It doesn't have anybody. Let's say list CRUD repository. Let's say CRUD repository. If you're going over here, let's say you have a save method. I understand that the save method they have written. So, I can use it to save an entity, but where is the logic? Well, the logic, as I said, you will not be writing the logic. The Spring will write the save logic for you. You can see the entity. What is the entity type? S. What is S? S can be anything. S can be anything, any class, student class, doctor class, employee class, lawyer class, book class, pen class, remote class, mic class, camera class. It can be anything. If you want to save a camera, this S will be camera. If you want to save a student, this S will be student. If you want to save a mobile phone, this S will be a mobile phone. Right? So what I mean by that, you just need to tell your DAO class that, okay, here I want to save a student or I want to delete a student. You just need to write your entity name over here, and accordingly Spring will basically generate a implementation class for you called student-DAO-impl, and will give you the logic for saving student, deleting student, removing student, updating student, and blah, blah, blah. And that implementation class will only be generated by Spring when your DAO is implementing the repository interface. And as I have told you, the JPA repository internally implementing the repository interface, and that implementation will be generated. But it is not going to be that straightforward. It will only be generated when you have that annotation called @enableRepository that you have already put inside your DB config file, right? So when you have that annotation, then only the repository's implementation will be generated by Spring, and you can happily use it. How? Let's see that. Next, I have created an interface, extend it to JPA repository. It is a repository interface. And now and this repository interface is there inside which package? This repository interface is there inside this package, right? com.selenium express whatever, okay, DAO package. Copy this package name, go to your db config, okay, and wherever you have done enable repository, just give the package name here, base packages, and give the package name of your repository over here, which is DAO. Now you're going to be seeing magic, what Spring, the enable repository is going to do. Now go to the app.java. Okay, now we don't have any student DAO impl object right here. Now we can go for student DAO. Okay, student DAO, and what is my interface name? Student DAO. What it is going to give? A student DAO.
Yes. Written that the student DAO extends JPA repository, right?
Yes.
On top of that class, can we write @repository?
No, I have not. Did I write it? No, I told no. This is JPA repository. I'm not writing any repository annotation. Nothing. I have written nothing here, right? So I'll go to the where I was inside the config file, a db config file, right? I've given the package name where I was inside the app.java. Okay. So here I have got the student DAO. Now see, you want to save the student. Now take the student DAO. Student DAO is what? An interface. Do you have anything inside it? Do you have written any code inside it? No. You want to do a save, right? Go back and just do dot and look at that. How many methods you are getting? Isn't it cool? You haven't written anything. Delete by ID, get by ID, find all, flush, push, a lot of different things. You can save. I want to save something. Let's say save. Okay. This save method, who is written? Did I write? No, I haven't write anything. I want to save. Put this object over here. What do you want to do? You want to iterate, right? I have removed the student DAO impl, right? You want to find all the student. So use this student DAO object right now. Okay. Now just do find all. Okay. Find all will give you a list of student right now. Okay. Look at that. Isn't it cool? Now just run this. Control S, Control Shift O to remove everything. Let's see if we are getting our desired things done. See, now is inserted the record. The record is inserted. If you don't believe me, just write another thing. Let's say I'm inserting a record. Let's say Rakesh, and let's say HYD, right? And this is Rakesh. Okay, creating a new object called Rakesh, saving it. Okay, and then I'll save Rakesh. Yes, I'm changing it to Rakesh. Let's just run this. Rakesh will be inserted. See all these things. Rakesh is inserted, and I'm also getting this data, right? Rakesh is inserted. Let's just check. See, Rakesh is inserted. So what is the cool thing over here? The cool thing is we don't have to write the methods right now. Spring is automatically generating the repository for you. Why? Because we have written @enableRepository. Okay. Now Spring is generating the repository for you. And we have just written a DAO class. We have extends to the JPA repository, and that's it. We don't have any methods. Let's say I want to find a specific student. Okay, go to the app.java. Okay, write a method. You don't have to write any method. Just use it. You have the student DAO, right? What is student DAO? The same interface that you have. The same interface that you have. You have no code inside it. Go back and just do dot find by ID. Okay, what ID you want? Let's say Rakesh record I want, number 6. Come over here, put number 6, right? And right here, control 1, assign statement to a new local variable, and you got the student, right? It is giving optional back. That means whenever you are doing 6, maybe there is a possibility that the number 6 record is not present in the database. So I can just do student dot is present. You can first check with a if block if the student is present, because it's giving you a optional. It is doing the null check by itself. And right here, if it is present, sys out student dot get, right? There you go. Let's say sys out and just keep some star marks here. Finding student with ID 6 star mark here. Okay, control S, run this. There you go. Finding student with ID 6 is Rakesh. This method, who have given us? Did I write it? No. Who have given us? The Spring Data JPA. The Spring Data JPA has created an implementation class for this guy. There is no code written by the developer, but it has created an implementation class. You don't believe me? Put a breakpoint here, right? Line number 23. Start debugging. Right click. Debug as Java application. Let the breakpoint stop over here in the line number 23. Okay. Do a switch. Okay. Go to the next step. Next step. Step over. What is step over? Step over. Hover on this. Look at that. What is this? A JDK dynamic proxy. So the implementation class has been given. The student DAO is what? It's an interface. The implementation has given by whom? By Spring. It has created a proxy object. What do you mean by proxy? So what do you feel? What is happening behind the scene? Anyone? What do you think? What is happening behind the scene? Right now, student DAO is an interface, right? But we got a proxy object as an implementation. So what do you mean by that?
There is the class called as
yeah, basic. No, let's not go into deep. We have an implementation called student DAO, but Spring behind the scene has created a class, implemented your interface, then given all the different methods that you are writing by yourself right here, right? All these methods like find all student, save student, find student by ID, delete student, remove student, all those methods Spring only has written for you. It just did a guesswork. Okay, just tell me two things. Tell me the entity that you are using. Okay, now here in the student DAO, what I have done, I just tell Spring two things. Okay, this is my entity name. This is the ID of my entity, the type of my entity, the ID type of my entity, and that's it. Spring has created given you the complete CRUD feature right over here. You can just do here, you can just go here and can do write anything over here and it will work like a chart, right? So that's the thing. So let me just close everything. So that's I just wanted to tell a few more things, but I think it will not be possible. But yeah, so I think you understand, right? All this thing is happened by default by Spring. And two things you remember: this entity scan that you are giving, the repository classes that you have written here, this the repository class that you have written here, this will not be automatically scanned by the component scanning, and the entity class that you have written here in the student.java, this will also not be automatically scanned by the component scanning. So the entity scan thing, you have to put it over here to your session factory. And for your repository classes like student DAO, because I want Spring to generate the implementation class for this and giving us the implementation, for that you have to go to the config class. Where is that? DB config, right? Here you have to put the thing right here. Okay. So this thing will not happen automatically. The repository class scanning and the entity class scanning will not happen automatically. And Spring Boot is doing all these things like a magic. Okay. How much time I have? I think we'll be ready, right? 9:16 already. Okay.
Repository, right? Called as CRUD repository.
Yes. We'll be discussing about all those things in the next class. These things, guys, you have done here, all is getting done by Spring Boot. Abhilash, can you please provide this video? Shivam, I'll try my best. Okay, I'll try my best. So guys, see, all these things is right now done by Spring only for you. You are not doing anything, right? Spring is right now Control-C, Control-V, Spring Boot. When you are using Spring Boot, you are not doing anything. All these things are done by Spring. All these configurations are done by Spring. So in Spring Boot, what you are doing, you are not actually using all this dependency, right? You are using one simple dependency. All this dependency you are not using. Data JPA and all this dependency. What is the only dependency you are using? Anyone? Spring Boot start as JPA, right? So you are coming over here. It is Spring Boot starter data JPA. And the starters data JPA is going to grab all this dependency that you have added, the provider, the JPA, the Hibernate, the Spring context and everything, Spring JDBC, Spring ORM, everything this guy will get you, okay? And that's it. And in the version, you don't have to maintain the version here, right? In the starter data JPA, or you also need a MySQL connector because you are connecting to the MySQL database. So in Spring Boot, these two dependency will be enough. And obviously right now the version will complain me. So how do I fix this version stuff? I have to add a parent dependency, right? In Spring Boot, yeah, start a parent. So I have to come over here. I have to come here and I have to go for Spring Boot start a parent, look for that. And I think starter test, start a parent. This one, go to 3.1.1, copy this guy, come back, paste it here. Okay. and it's not a dependency, remove the dependency, and remove the dependency and the type, and there you go. You have the parent, and that's it. Your code is ready, because right now everything will happen automatically. So right here, you have done everything, right? So in the source main Java right now, all these things you can safely delete. In the DAO class, you can just delete this DAO impl class, not needed. You can go and delete this configuration package, not needed, right? And you need the entity, and in the application.java, here you have to just do a little bit of tweak. What tweaks you have to do? Container you don't have to create. How you will create a container in Spring Boot? Anyone, guys?
Spring application.run.
Spring application.run. Cool. That's it. You are done with the application. Spring application.run. In the run method, two things you'll be providing. What is that? The first thing, the configuration, the starter class name, app.java. This is going to be my starter class, and the args. This is going to help me to provide the container, right? So control 1, assign statement to a new local variable. This is your container, right? That's it. You are done. And the starter class, to this starter class, I'll tell, okay, I will not configure the data source. Okay, I will not configure the entity manager factory in anything. So you automatically enable the configuration for me, right? Component scanning only, you only do it. Everything you will only do. So right now, I will just use this Spring application annotation. It will automatically activate the component scanning. It will also set up the data source in the entity manager factory, transaction manager, everything by itself, because it has the enable auto configuration, right? So that's it. Control Shift O to remove any imports that you have, and I think you are done. This is my Spring Boot application, right? Spring application.run, right click, run as Spring Boot app. Okay. Oh, the data source information we don't have over here. So add a source folder, new source folder, and source main resources. Okay. And here just create a application.properties file. File application.properties. Okay, and here just define your data source information. Data source, what is that? Username, right? Username, and then password.
The URL.
And the URL, yes. And the URL. Datasource.url. Where is that? Let me just write the URL here. Okay, so the URL will be dvconfig. The URL will be this. Copy this, Control C. Go to your application properties, paste it. Username is going to be root. Password is going to be Avilas, right? Control S, and that's it. Let's go to my Spring Boot project. Go to app.java. Run this.
Don't
Yes.
you have to give this Hibernate.ddl?
Let's not give it. That's fine. Okay. See, it's working fine, right? Everything is happening automatically. The scanning, all the stuff is happening automatically. You have just built the Spring Boot application by yourself. Now your job is go and activate the debug here to true and analyze. Alright guys, so once you activated the debug, just check everything that you have configured there by yourself is automatically getting configured by Spring Boot by the Spring Boot auto configuration feature. So if you're going to do a Control F here and look for, let's say, data source, you're going to be finding there is a data source auto configuration. See this data source auto configuration. This is the auto configuration class, which is basically configuring the data source for you. If you're going to do a Control Shift T and want to go into this class, you can see this is the automatic data source configuration, which is basically helping you to set up some data source over here, right? I don't want to go into the code of that. That is happening automatically by Spring. Spring has written the data source code for that. And you don't have to configure the data source by yourself. And for an example, if you're going to do Control F and look for what else we have configured on our Spring application, I think the EntityManager factory. If you're going to go up, you can find, you can see initialize the JPA Entity Manager factory and the persistence unit is default. That means Spring is by default creating a Entity Manager factory for you. It is configuring it for you, that Entity Manager factory bean that we have created, right? Do a Control F and search here inside the log. You can see there is some auto configuration called JPA base configuration, and here you can see Entity Manager factory meshed, and they are creating you the same factory. You can see local container entity manager factory bean. This guy, right, is automatically getting created for you, and you don't have to create a local container entity manager factory bean. And the condition, you can see there is a conditional on missing bean. That means if the developer is not defining an entity manager factory by himself, then Spring is going to create this bean for you automatically, local container entity manager factory bean. Like that, what else we have configured? Do a Control F. We have configured transaction, right? Let's say transaction manager. See, the transaction manager configuration is also matching. You can see conditional on missing bean. If the transaction manager is not defined, this bean is not defined, then the transaction manager is automatically getting configured by this JPA based configuration class. So you can go to, you can look for the transaction stuff. I can see, this is JTA auto configuration. So it is activating the JTA transaction manager is setting off. We have configured the JPA transaction manager, but Spring is automatically setting the JTA transaction manager for us, right? If you're gonna keep on doing next, you're gonna be seeing like here, transaction management auto configuration, they're activating the platform transaction manager and all these things. See, enable transaction management configuration is also getting triggered, and that at enable transaction management that we have given, right? And now Spring Boot is automatically enabling the transaction management for you. Lot of things it is happening behind the scene, like the transaction manager, entity manager factory, the auto configuration for the data source. All these things are getting triggered by Spring Boot. So basically, if you want to test this, you already know the Spring Boot application is already containing the enable auto configuration. So this guy is doing the magic. But let's say if you are going to exclude let's say the data source auto configuration, then your application will not start. Data source auto configuration class. If I'm going to exclude this auto configuration, then things will not happen. So if I'm going to resume this, you'll see that your application is not starting, because now the student DAO bean is not available, because it is not able to connect to the database, because the data source is not available. So we have turned off the data source auto configuration. Now you can go to your Spring Boot project. You can, same way, you can create a configuration file here in your Spring Boot project, create a config package and create the data source connection, then your application will work. If I will Control Z this, okay, then my application will start normally. If I'll run this, it will start as usual, it will work, okay. But here, if I'll come here, what is this? Entity Manager, it is setting off the JTA platform manager, the JTA platform implementation for my transaction management. Entity Manager factory, it is setting up by default, right? Do a Control F, do find, look which class is setting off the Entity Manager for you. Local container Hibernate JPA auto configuration. You can see there is a class here which is setting off the local container entity manager factory bean. Okay, look for the class which is doing the auto configuration. You can copy this and you can just go here and can do a exclude. Then you'll see that your application is not starting because this auto configuration you are turning off. Then it is expected that you will be creating the config file and you will be writing the configuration for this local container entity manager factory bean. You need to write the bean for that manually. So you can exclude this, you can create a configuration file and keep checking on the same thing that we have already discussed, right? So just wanted to let you know that the auto configuration here is helping you so that you don't have anything inside the Spring Boot project. See, you have only a simple DAO class, and this DAO is getting scanned by your application. The Spring Boot application stuff is taking care of everything. And also you have a simple entity class. You have nothing else. You have no configuration file here, but still all the configurations are automatically done for you, right? But as I said, here you can see the entity is automatically getting scanned and the DAO is automatically getting scanned, right? But I told this couple of things will not be done by the component scanning. If you know, in the app.java, the Spring application has a component scan, right? It has a component scan, enable component scanning. Where is that? Auto configuration, Spring Boot configuration, component scan is there. But this component scan will not be scanning your entity and the DAO class. Just remember that. Here it is scanning because we are following the Spring Boot project. See the root project? It is starting with what? Data JPA intro, then we are having data JPA intro.dao, data JPA intro.entity. But let's say I am keeping my entity class in a different package. For an example, here I will create a package called, let's just create a package here, simple package. Two packages I'll create. Let's say this is my entity package, okay? And I will create another package called DAO, right? That time the automatic scanning will not happen. If you're going to keep your student inside the entity package, let's just do a okay. I'm sure that your student data will not be inserted to the database because this entity will not be scanned. If I'll resume this, see, we are having a problem. EntityManager factory could not found. See, we are having some issues here. It is saying no bean called EntityManager factory is available. Oh, this is happening because in your app.java, we have excluded the EntityManager factory. Let me remove this. Let me launch it, and you will see like the thing will not happen. See, no managed type called student. This student entity is not available because right now Spring is not able to scan your entity, right? This question only you are asking, right? So now this entity cannot be scanned. So you have to explicitly go to app.java class, and then you have to use an annotation called EntityScan, and then you have to define your package here. For an example, my package name is whatever, define it here. This scanning, the entity scanning will not be happen by this component scan that you have. Just remember that this component scan will not detect the entity annotation. Now if you're going to resume, I think it will work. Now if you are resuming, yeah, your student is basically inserted to the database, right? It's working fine. So this is one thing that you have to remember. Same like that, if you're gonna go to the DAO package, and if you're gonna move this DAO to this DAO, now as I said, this DAO is having is extending the JPA repository, right? This JPA repository is also going to be scanned by Spring Boot, right? How it is scanning, we're going to be talking about that in our future lessons. But I think if I'll go to the same application and if I'm going to be launching this, I think I'm going to be having problems. See, it is having problem. No such bean definition called student DAO is available because I have moved it to a different project, which is not, matching with the Spring Boot project that I have. The app.java is where? The app.java is inside the data JPA intro package. So either I have to keep my DAO inside this, or I have to keep my DAO inside any package which is getting started with this namespace. Like you see this DAO package, it is inside the same namespace where my app.java is, right? So now the DAO will not be automatically scanned. Then you have to again go to the app.java and you have to write at EnableJPA repository, and you have to specify here DAO, and then only your the proxy will be created for your DAO. Okay, so now I have only a couple of dependency here. One is my MySQL driver dependency, and one is my Spring Boot starter data JPA dependency, and this is the magic dependency that we have. This dependency is going to pull in everything for you, and that's why it is a starter data JPA dependency. It is one of the starter project of Spring Boot. So Spring Boot don't want you to go and look for all the dependency by yourself like we did. It will pull in everything by itself. For an example, if you want to go inside this dependency, you can see it has everything. See, it has Spring Boot starter AOP, whatever Spring Boot feels like it is needed. It has Spring Boot starter JDBC. We have seen, like, we are using JDBC also in our project. You remember I have pulled in Spring ORM, and inside Spring ORM we had Spring JDBC, and inside Spring JDBC we had DriverManagerDatasource. And that's why this boot starter JDBC project will bring in all the dependency which is related to the Spring JDBC stuff. And also it is pulling in the Hikari connection pooling. See, it is by default giving you a connection pool feature. You don't have to, create a normal driver manager data source kind of a thing. Spring Boot will even create you a better connection pool. And also, if you're going to come back here, you will be finding your data JPA dependencies here. You have Spring Aspect dependency. You have Hibernate core dependency, right? All this dependency has been pulled in by Spring Boot starter data JPA project. So this dependency from our project is it is the one-stop solution for the developer, where you're going to be getting all the dependency that you will be needing. That's why if you'll be going to the Maven dependency section, see all this different dependency that you have, which is needed to build a data JPA application in Spring. So that's why the Spring Data JPA not only bought you the data JPA dependency for your repository creation, automatic repository creation. It also brings you the Hibernate. So Spring Boot internally uses Hibernate for the JPA provider, and also it uses the JDBC, and also it brings in the AOP and the different stuff, right? One last thing, guys, whenever you are practicing, if you are using the normal application, normal Spring application, whenever you are creating the Entity Manager Factory, if you want to see the properties, for an example, this Hibernate adapter, right? You have it over here. Create the Hibernate adapter separately like this. Control 1, assign statement to a new local variable like this, and just give this guy to here. And if you want to set the, if you want to show the SQL property, you can just set it to here. Hibernate JPA adapter dot show SQL, and you can make it true. Whenever you are debugging, you can do this in the normal Spring application. If you want to show your SQL thing, right? This is my normal application, right? Not the Spring Boot application. So I can just go ahead and run this. It will print the SQL, how it is going to, you can see the insert queries are getting printed, okay? And the same thing in Spring Boot also you can do. In the Spring Boot, in the application.properties file, you know what you have to do. You have to just activate the show SQL. So whenever you are debugging, just activate this couple of property just to make sure the things are working fine or not. So go to the Spring Boot project, run it as a Spring Boot application, right click Spring application, and it will just help you to print and log the different things. The insert queries are here, the select queries and the insert queries are here. Okay, that's it, guys. I have to go tomorrow. Tomorrow we don't have any sessions. Wednesday we'll be meeting again. That's it, guys, for today. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry I'll not be able to take any questions right now. Okay, thank you. I hope you understand that. I'll see you guys. Thank you guys for staying with me for around a couple of hours. I think we have done few things today. Okay, so I do think, guys, this session is okay. I know this is a little bit of internal stuff, but do you think yeah, I think it is good for understanding. So you have it, you practice it, but not required to understand all this thing. If you are a very beginner, just ignore this. Otherwise, just continue from the next session. We'll be talking about a lot of different things. Okay.
Where can I find last session recording?
It's already there, Lipika. It's already there, Sheetal, on the Spring Boot 3, the new repository. Ask in the group, and these people will give you the recording link. Okay. Thank you, guys. Just ping me your questions on the chat, please. I have to go. Thank you, guys. Have a good day, and yeah, see you guys on Wednesday. Bye bye. Okay, guys, for the final time, all the new recordings are going to this course. Okay, so all the 2023, the Spring Boot 3 recordings are going to this course, and you can come to here to the last section, and the Spring Data JPA starts from here. So today's recording will be added to this playlist only. Do remember that? I will not repeat it. So 2023 recordings are coming to here. You can see this is only having around 60 hours of content, but this will keep on growing. So all the new people, like for your recording, the 2023 people, your course is going to be this. But if you have access to the microservices course, let's say, then you can learn the microservices course. These are all the 2022 batch course, right? So you can go here and can learn about like different design patterns and all the stuffs in microservices. But your sessions will be different on microservices, and your sessions will go to maybe this course or maybe a other new course. And another thing is, let's say, you want to learn the data JPA, the Spring Boot, and all the other stuff. You don't want to wait for the live sessions. Then go to this course and look for the videos that you want to find for Spring Boot, Spring REST, Hibernate. If you're planning to learn Hibernate, then learn it from here. Learn all these things, like it is going to be a step-by-step process, right? And for boot, you go to the last page. You go to the last page here, to the page number 5, and you start learning boot from here, right? Spring Boot starts from here if you are talking about the 2022 batch. But if you are not planning to follow the recording, you are attending the live, just follow the boot from here, because we have started boot already from here, right? I hope this is making sense. Yeah, thank you guys.